The radio crackled with 3 words that made Lieutenant Lila Cole's blood run cold. "We're getting overrun." Through her rifle scope, 300 meters away, she watched 12 muzzle flashes light up the jungle canopy like deadly fireflies. The SEAL team was trapped in a valley so thick with vegetation you couldn't see the sky, taking precision fire from positions they couldn't locate, couldn't suppress, couldn't survive. 50-plus enemy fighters had them surrounded, outnumbered 10-1, and the math was simple. In less than 10 minutes, 8 good men would be dead. Standard protocol said wait for air support, call the quick reaction force, maintain observation. She was 1 sniper with 1 rifle. The book said she couldn't make a difference against 50 enemies in fortified positions. Lila had never been very good at following the book when it meant watching people die. She chambered a .50 caliber round into her Barrett M82A1, adjusted her scope for humidity and elevation, and keyed her radio one last time. "Ground Team Alpha, keep your heads down. I'm going to work." What happened over the next 8 minutes would become legend. 12 precision kills that turned a massacre into a miracle, delivered by a woman the enemy never saw until it was far too late. Lila Cole had earned her place in the special operations sniper community the hard way, by being better than everyone else. At 5'6" with auburn hair usually tied back in a regulation bun, she didn't look like anyone's idea of a deadly precision shooter. The instructors at Fort Bragg had given her 3 days before she quit. She'd finished top of her class with the highest accuracy scores in program history. Now, 2 combat deployments, and 3 years later, she was attached to SEAL Team 7, conducting operations in an unnamed Southeast Asian country, a place where American forces officially didn't exist, doing things that officially never happened. The jungle here was different from anything in training. Triple canopy rainforest where visibility dropped to near zero, humidity that made sweat feel like oil, and vegetation so dense it created its own weather. The mission had been simple. The SEALs would recon a suspected enemy logistics hub, observe and report, avoid contact. Lila would provide overwatch from the ridgeline, making sure nobody approached their insertion point. Intelligence had been catastrophically wrong. What they'd called a suspected logistics hub was actually a forward operating base for a battalion-strength enemy force that had been waiting for exactly this kind of American incursion. The ambush had been textbook perfect. The SEALs moved into the valley on what appeared to be a game trail, maintaining noise discipline that would have made them invisible to most enemies. But whoever planned this ambush had studied how American special operations units moved. They'd let the SEALs penetrate deep into the kill zone, then triggered the ambush from elevated positions on 3 sides. The 4th side was blocked by a river too deep and fast to cross under fire. Classic L-shaped ambush, no escape, no cover, no chance. Lila had watched it unfold through her scope, her elevated position giving her a bird's-eye view of the entire nightmare. Muzzle flashes appeared simultaneously from a dozen positions. The SEALs immediately returned fire and tried to maneuver, their voices calm and professional on the radio, even as their world turned into hell. Then came the first casualty report, then the second, then the assessment that made her heart stop. "We are outnumbered approximately 10-1. Enemy has superior positioning and fields of fire. We need air support now, or we're not getting out." Air support was 30 minutes out. The quick reaction force was 45 minutes away. The SEALs had maybe 10 minutes before the enemy closed in for the kill. Standard procedure said maintain observation, provide intelligence, coordinate incoming support. She was 1 sniper. The book said she couldn't make a difference. Lila had made a career out of proving the book wrong. She keyed her radio. "Ground Team Alpha, this is Overwatch. I have visual on multiple enemy positions. Preparing to engage." There was a pause. Then, the team leader's voice, strained but professional. "Overwatch negative. Maintain observation. You can't engage that many targets solo." "Watch me," Lila said, and switched to receive only. The Barrett M82A1 wasn't subtle. 50 caliber rounds traveling at nearly 3,000 feet per second, capable of punching through engine blocks and concrete walls. Most snipers used it for material targets. Lila used it because in jungle terrain where you couldn't always see your enemy clearly, The massive round gave you margin for error that smaller calibers didn't provide. During the initial ambush, she'd already identified the key positions, 12 fighting positions on the high ground, each containing 3 to 5 fighters. Some had heavy machine guns. All had clear fields of fire into the valley where the SEALs were dying. The math was brutal. 12 positions, 8 minutes before total collapse, 1 rifle. That meant roughly 40 seconds per target, not for the shot itself, but for target identification, range calculation, wind adjustment, firing, and immediate relocation before return fire arrived. It should have been impossible. Lila had built her reputation on impossible shots. She settled behind her rifle, controlled her breathing like she'd done 1,000 times before, and began the most intense 8 minutes of combat shooting in Special Operations history. Target 1. Range 347 meters, enemy machine gun position on the left flank, elevated 20 meters above the valley floor. 3 fighters visible, 1 on the gun, 2 feeding ammunition. The gun was systematically tearing apart the jungle where the SEALs had taken cover, methodical fire that would eventually find flesh. Lila centered her crosshairs on the gunner's chest. The slight crosswind required minimal adjustment at this range. She found the natural pause between heartbeats and squeezed the trigger. The Barrett roared. Through her scope, she watched the gunner disappear in a red mist as the .50 caliber round did what .50 caliber rounds did to human bodies at any range. She didn't wait to observe the other 2 fighters' reaction. She was already moving, shifting 3 meters right to a secondary position she'd prepared earlier. Return fire arrived at her previous location 5 seconds later, disciplined and accurate, but hitting empty jungle. Time elapsed, 38 seconds, 1 position neutralized, 11 to go. Target 2, range 298 meters, enemy position at the valley's mouth, blocking the SEALs' only retreat route. This position had a PKM machine gun and at least 4 fighters. The team leader was specifically calling for fire on this position. It was the cork in the bottle, the thing preventing their withdrawal. Lila acquired the gunner, adjusted for decreased range, and fired. The round hit low, striking the gunner in the abdomen rather than chest. With a .50 caliber, it didn't matter. Center mass anywhere meant catastrophic trauma and instant incapacitation. She was moving before the spent casing hit the ground, relocating to position 3. Her philosophy was simple. Shoot and move, never fire twice from the same spot, never give the enemy a stationary target to acquire. Time elapsed, 1 minute 19 seconds, 2 positions down, 10 to go. Target 3, range 412 meters, enemy position on high ground to the right, with excellent overview of the entire valley. This was a leadership element. She could see 2 fighters with radios, directing fire for the other positions. Lila took an extra second for this shot. Longer range meant more wind drift, more bullet drop, more time for the round to travel. She steadied her breathing, found the pause between heartbeats, and squeezed. The spotter with the radio dropped like someone had cut his strings. The second fighter grabbed for the radio, trying to maintain coordination. Lila had already chambered another round. Second shot, second kill. The leadership position went silent. Immediately, the enemy's coordinated fire began to falter. Without central coordination, each position was operating independently, without mutual support or tactical awareness. Time elapsed, 2 minutes 15 seconds, 4 kills, 8 positions remaining. "Overwatch, whatever you're doing, keep doing it," the SEAL team leader called. "Enemy fire is decreasing. We're getting some mobility back." Lila didn't respond. She was already scanning for target 4, her breathing controlled, her mind locked into what instructors called the zone, that state where time seemed to slow down, where every variable was crystal clear, where impossible shots became routine. Target 4, range 356 meters, another machine gun position, firing from behind a fallen log that provided excellent cover. The gunner was smart, exposing himself for only seconds at a time to fire controlled bursts, then dropping back. Lila waited. Patience was a sniper's greatest weapon. The gunner would have to expose himself to fire effectively. When he did, she'd have maybe 2 seconds. There. The gunner rose, shouldered his weapon, began traversing fire across the SEAL position. Lila's crosshairs were already waiting for him. She fired the instant he appeared. The round hit him in the upper chest. The massive energy transfer, over 10,000 foot-pounds at this range, threw him backward and over the log he'd been using for protection. Time elapsed. 2 minutes, 58 seconds. 5 down, 7 to go. By now, the enemy had figured out they had a serious sniper problem. Return fire toward her general area intensified, but they couldn't pinpoint her exact location. She was using terrain, vegetation, and constant movement to stay ahead of their targeting. Rounds cracked through the trees around her, some close enough that she heard the supersonic snap as they passed. She ignored them. Fear was a luxury she couldn't afford. The SEALs were depending on her. Target 5. Range 289 meters. Enemy fighters attempting to flank the SEAL position from the left, moving through thick undergrowth. This was the most immediate threat. If they succeeded in flanking, the SEALs would be caught in crossfire with no cover. Lila tracked the lead fighter through the vegetation. Harder shot, moving target, partial concealment, shorter range meaning less reaction time. She led the target slightly, accounting for his movement speed and direction, and fired. The round caught him in the side as he moved between two large trees. He dropped instantly. The fighters behind him immediately went to ground. Their entire flanking maneuver stopped cold by one well-placed shot. Time elapsed. 3 minutes, 44 seconds. 6 positions neutralized, 6 remaining. Halfway there, 4 minutes of continuous shooting that felt like 4 hours. Her shoulder was bruising from the Barrett's recoil, despite proper technique and the weapon's excellent recoil management system. Sweat was running into her eyes despite the headband. Her hands remained steady, but she could feel adrenaline starting to fade, fatigue creeping in at the edges. She pushed it aside. The SEALs didn't need her tired. They needed her lethal. Target 6. Range 445 meters. Long shot. Enemy position on the opposite ridgeline, attempting to target her location with a designated marksman rifle. She could see the glint of his scope as he scanned systematically for her position. This was personal. Sniper versus sniper, a duel of skill and patience. He was good, methodical, had almost located her twice. But Lila had been doing this longer, in worse conditions, against better opponents. She found him through her scope, calculated the long-range shot accounting for increased wind drift and significant bullet drop, and fired. At this range, the bullet took over a second to travel. She watched through her scope as the distant figure jerked and fell backward, his rifle clattering away down the rocks. Time elapsed. 4 minutes, 38 seconds. 7 down, 5 to go. The volume of enemy fire was noticeably reduced now. The SEALs were using the respite to reorganize, treat their wounded, and prepare for withdrawal. But they were still effectively pinned. Lila needed to eliminate the remaining positions before they could safely move. Target 7. Range 312 meters. Enemy fighters regrouping behind a large boulder, trying to coordinate a renewed assault. She could see 3 fighters in close proximity, dangerously close. Lila aimed for the center fighter. At this range, with the Barrett's massive .50 caliber round, there was a significant chance of overpenetration, the round passing through one target and hitting another behind it. She took the shot. The round hit the center fighter and kept going, striking the fighter directly behind him. 2 kills with 1 bullet, unintentional but devastatingly effective. The third fighter broke and ran, abandoning his position entirely. Time elapsed. 5 minutes, 21 seconds, 9 positions down, 3 remaining. "Overwatch, we're preparing to move," the SEAL team leader called, his voice carrying new hope. "We need those remaining positions suppressed for withdrawal." "Working on it," Lila responded curtly, already searching for Target 8. Target 8, range 267 meters, the closest remaining enemy position, which also made it the most dangerous to her. A heavy machine gun team providing sustained suppressive fire, keeping the SEALs pinned in place. The gun shield made targeting the gunner directly almost impossible. Lila shifted her aim to the ammunition bearer, feeding the belt into the weapon. The round hit him center mass, and in his death spasm, he pulled the ammunition belt sideways, jamming the gun mechanism. The gunner immediately turned to clear the jam, exposing himself completely from behind the protective shield. Lila's follow-up shot caught him before he could fix the problem or take cover. The heavy gun went silent. Time elapsed. 6 minutes, 29 seconds. 11 positions neutralized. 1 remaining. 1 minute and 31 seconds left in her self-imposed 8-minute window. one more critical target. Then, the SEALs could execute their withdrawal under covering fire from the incoming helicopters she could now hear in the distance. Target 9. Range 389 meters. The last significant enemy position she could identify. Another leadership element attempting to rally the remaining scattered fighters for a final desperate assault. 2 fighters with radios and maps spread out before them, clearly officers or senior NCOS trying to coordinate what was left of their ambush. This needed to be absolutely perfect. Take them both out decisively, shatter the enemy's command structure completely, and the remaining fighters would likely withdraw rather than continue a fight they were clearly losing. Lila took a deep breath, forcing oxygen into muscles that were beginning to fatigue. She acquired the first target, an officer gesturing emphatically while speaking into his radio. She fired. Kill. She chambered another round with practiced speed, shifted smoothly to the second target who was already reacting, already moving. She led him slightly, anticipating his movement away from his fallen comrade. Fired. The second officer dropped before he'd made it 3 steps toward cover. Time elapsed, 7 minutes 51 seconds, 12 enemy positions neutralized, 9 seconds to spare. The valley had transformed from a roaring cacophony of violence into an eerily quiet space punctuated only by sporadic, disorganized shooting. The devastating volume of coordinated fire that had been systematically tearing apart the jungle had collapsed into chaos. Individual fighters fired randomly, without coordination, without leadership, without purpose. The SEAL team was already moving with professional efficiency, using the sudden suppression to withdraw in good order toward their extraction point. Their training had prepared them for this. The instant the pressure lifted, they moved. "Overwatch, this is Ground Team Alpha," the team leader's voice came through her earpiece, and for the first time she could hear real emotion breaking through the professional calm. "I don't know what the hell you just did up there, but we're mobile. We're getting our wounded out. You just saved 8 lives. He paused, and when he continued, his voice was rough. "Thank you doesn't begin to cover it, but thank you." Lila allowed herself exactly 5 seconds to feel the satisfaction of mission success, the relief that came from knowing those men would go home to their families. Then, professional survival instinct took over. She was moving immediately, breaking down her position with practiced efficiency, preparing for her own extraction. The enemy would be actively searching for her now, and staying in one location was suicide. Every sniper knew the rule. The most dangerous time is right after a successful engagement, when the enemy knows you're out there and is hunting specifically for you. She humped her rifle and gear through the dense jungle toward her backup extraction point, moving with the careful, deliberate pace that kept operators alive in hostile territory. Behind her, the sound of helicopter rotors grew louder, the quick reaction force arriving to provide covering fire for the SEAL team's withdrawal. Her radio crackled with a new voice, deeper and more authoritative. "Overwatch, this is QRF Actual. SEAL team is secure and loading. What's your status?" "Mobile and clear," Lila responded professionally, her breathing controlled despite the physical exertion. "Proceeding to alternate extraction point. No immediate pursuit detected." "Copy that. Sanitize your position and move to Lima Zulu. We'll have a bird waiting. Extraction in 30 mics." Lila confirmed and kept moving steadily through the jungle. 30 minutes to cover 2 kilometers of dense tropical terrain, reach the designated landing zone, and disappear before anyone came looking for the sniper who just turned a guaranteed massacre into an against-all-odds withdrawal. She made it in 23 minutes. The helicopter was already on the ground, rotors turning, when she emerged from the tree line. The crew chief waved her aboard urgently. As she climbed in and the bird lifted off, she finally allowed herself to fully process what had just happened. 12 precision shots, 8 minutes, 8 lives saved. Not bad for a day's work. The after-action review took place 72 hours later in a classified facility that officially didn't exist, with people whose names were redacted from all official documentation. Lila sat across from a full bird colonel from Special Operations Command, a SEAL team commander she recognized from previous operations, and her own unit's commanding officer. The walls were bare, except for a large monitor displaying drone footage, radio transcripts, and ballistic analysis from her engagement. The colonel spoke first, his voice neutral and professional. "Captain Cole, I've personally reviewed all available footage from your engagement. I've also reviewed the SEAL team's helmet camera recordings, radio intercepts, and ballistic reports from the scene. Before we proceed, I need you to walk me through your decision-making process in detail." Lila kept her voice calm and professional, the same tone she'd use for any operational debrief. "Sir, Ground Team Alpha was pinned down with multiple casualties, effectively surrounded and outnumbered approximately 10-1 based on muzzle flash count and radio intercepts. Air support was estimated at 30 minutes out minimum. Standard doctrine would have dictated that I maintain my observation post and coordinate incoming support." "But you didn't follow standard doctrine," the colonel stated flatly. "No, sir. I conducted a tactical assessment and determined that the team had less than 10 minutes before being overrun based on enemy movement patterns and the volume of fire. I had the capability, position, and equipment to directly affect the tactical situation. I assessed that taking action offered a higher probability of team survival than maintaining observation. By engaging 50-plus enemy combatants with a bolt-action rifle. By systematically eliminating the enemy's command and control structure and key weapon systems, sir," Lila corrected respectfully. "I didn't need to neutralize all 50 fighters. I needed to eliminate the 12 positions that were coordinating their fire, providing heavy weapon support, and directing their tactical movements. Remove the coordination and heavy weapons, and 50 fighters become 50 individuals without a unified plan." The SEAL commander leaned forward, his weathered face showing the strain of recent combat. "Captain, my men are alive right now because you disobeyed your explicit orders and conducted what was essentially a solo direct action mission in enemy territory. I want to be absolutely clear about something. From my perspective, and from the perspective of every operator in that valley, you showed exceptional tactical judgment, remarkable combat skill, and saved American lives against impossible odds." He paused, glancing at the colonel. "However, from a command perspective," the colonel sighed heavily. "From a command perspective, Captain Cole, you created a significant problem. You engaged without proper authorization, exposed yourself to extreme and unnecessary risk, conducted operations well outside your assigned role and mission parameters, and made strategic decisions that should have gone through the chain of command. If you had been killed or captured in that engagement, it would have created an international incident and potentially compromised ongoing operations in the region." "Yes, sir. I fully understand the implications," Lila said quietly. "I don't think you completely understand the scope of what you've created here." The colonel pulled out a file folder, setting it deliberately on the table between them. "I have in this file 2 documents with your name on them. The first is a recommendation for a Silver Star for conspicuous gallantry in action against an enemy force. The second is a formal letter of reprimand for disobeying direct orders and exceeding operational authority." He let that sink in for a moment. "Both recommendations are completely justified based on your actions. Both will be going into your official record." Lila nodded, accepting the consequences. It was a fair assessment. She had saved lives, but she'd also broken the rules to do it. In the special operations community, that was always a complicated calculation. "However," the colonel continued, his tone shifting slightly, "there is a third document in this file. A recruitment request from a highly classified unit that has been tracking your career with considerable interest. Today's operation convinced them that you're exactly what they're looking for." Lila's commanding officer spoke up for the first time. "Captain Cole, this unit specializes in operations where one operator with the right combination of technical skills and independent judgment can achieve strategic effects in denied areas. Long-range precision targeting in locations where conventional forces can't operate. Solo infiltration and engagement in environments where backup isn't available and won't be coming. The kind of work where you're alone, unsupported, and expected to make tactical and sometimes strategic decisions in real time that will either save lives or create international complications." "What unit are we discussing, sir?" Lila asked carefully. "You don't get to know that until you formally accept their recruitment offer," the colonel said. "What I can tell you is that they've been watching you for over a year, reviewing every operation, every shot, every decision you've made in the field. What happened 3 days ago wasn't an aberration in their eyes. It was confirmation that you think and operate exactly the way they need their people to think and operate. The SEAL commander added, "These are the people who get called when the conventional approach won't work. When the situation is so complicated, so politically sensitive, or so tactically impossible that sending in a team isn't an option, they need operators who can work alone, think independently, and accomplish missions that officially never happen." Lila considered carefully. She joined the army to make a real difference, to be part of something larger than herself, to use her skills where they mattered most. But she'd learned over multiple deployments that sometimes making the biggest difference meant operating outside the traditional command structure in the shadows and the margins, where one person with the right skills and the courage to act could change everything. The colonel was watching her face. "This isn't a decision you need to make right now. Take some time. Think about what you want your career to look like, but understand that if you accept, you'll be leaving conventional special operations behind. You'll be operating alone more often than not, in situations where backup isn't coming and extraction isn't guaranteed. The missions will be more dangerous, the stakes will be higher, and the recognition will be non-existent, because nothing you do will ever be acknowledged officially." "When would I need to decide, sir?" "You have 72 hours. After that, the offer expires, and you return to your current unit." Lila stood, came to attention. "Thank you, sir. I'll have my answer within 48 hours. As she turned to leave, the SEAL commander stood and extended his hand. "Whatever you decide, Captain, know that my men and I owe you our lives. That's not something we forget." "Ever." Lila shook his hand firmly. "Just doing my job, sir." "No," he said quietly. "You were doing something more than that. You were doing what needed to be done, regardless of what the rules said. That's rare. Don't lose that." Lila spent the next 48 hours reviewing her career, her motivations, and what she wanted to accomplish with the skills she'd spent years developing. She thought about the 8 men who went home to their families because she'd refused to follow the book. She thought about all the other situations where one skilled operator in the right place at the right time could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. She made her decision in 36 hours. 18 months later, Captain Lila Cole, though she no longer used that rank in her current assignment, stood on a different ridgeline in a different unnamed country, watching through her scope as a convoy of vehicles moved through a narrow mountain pass. The mission brief had been characteristically simple. Eliminate a high-value target traveling in the third vehicle, an individual whose continued existence represented a significant threat to regional stability and American interests. Simple, except the convoy consisted of 12 vehicles with over 60 heavily armed security personnel and mobile air defense systems that made any form of helicopter insertion or drone strike impossible. The conventional approach would have been to wait for a better opportunity, a more favorable tactical situation. But intelligence indicated this was a now or never scenario. Miss this window, and the target would disappear into a location where even this unit couldn't reach him. Lila had spent 3 days infiltrating to this position, moving alone through some of the most hostile terrain on Earth, carrying her rifle and enough supplies to survive. She'd been in position for 18 hours, waiting for the convoy to appear, calculating wind patterns, temperature variations, and the dozens of other variables that affected a shot at this range. 847 meters, steep downward angle, variable mountain winds, moving target in an armored vehicle, a shot that most snipers would call impossible. Lila had built her reputation on impossible shots. She chambered a round, made her final calculations, and settled into the shooting position she'd refined over thousands of hours of practice. The SEALs from that jungle operation had sent her a gift before she'd transferred to her new unit, a custom-made patch that she now wore on her gear, unofficial and against regulations, but deeply meaningful. 12 targets, 8 minutes, 1 shot, 1 kill, no excuses. She'd earned that patch in a valley choked with jungle when she'd proven that sometimes the most dangerous person on a battlefield is the one with the patience, skill, and absolute determination to take the shot when everyone else says it's impossible. The convoy approached her optimal firing window, the third vehicle moving at approximately 40 kilometers per hour. The target would be visible through the window for approximately 2 seconds as the vehicle rounded a curve in the road. 2 seconds to change the strategic situation in an entire region. 2 seconds to justify 3 days of infiltration and 18 hours of waiting. Lila controlled her breathing, found the natural pause between heartbeats, and reminded herself of the fundamental lesson she'd learned that day in the jungle. The book says one sniper can't change the outcome of a battle. But the book doesn't account for snipers who refuse to accept impossible, who refuse to let good people die while following rules that don't match the reality on the ground. The target vehicle entered the curve. Through her scope, she could see the passenger clearly, exactly who intelligence had said would be there. Her finger found the trigger with the familiar pressure she'd applied thousands of times. In the valley below, the target was seconds away from rounding the curve and disappearing, completely unaware that his life was being measured in the time it takes for a .50 caliber round to travel 847 meters through mountain air. Lila squeezed the trigger. The Barrett roared, the massive recoil absorbed by her shoulder and the weapon's excellent dampening system. Through her scope, she tracked the round for the second it took to cover the distance. Impact. The vehicle swerved violently, the driver reacting to something catastrophic inside the passenger compartment. The convoy immediately went into protective mode, vehicles accelerating and dispersing, security personnel deploying to scan for threats. But Lila was already moving, breaking down her position, beginning the 3-day exfiltration that would get her out of the country before anyone even came close to finding where the shot originated from. Mission complete. Target eliminated. Strategic situation altered. One rifle, one operator. One shot that would never be acknowledged, never be celebrated, never officially exist. As she moved through the mountains, Lila thought about the 8 men from that jungle valley who'd gone home to their families. She thought about whatever threat the target in that convoy had represented, now permanently neutralized. She thought about all the operations she'd conducted since joining this unit, missions that prevented attacks, saved lives, and changed outcomes in ways the public would never know about and the government would never acknowledge. This was the real war, she'd learned, not the big battles with thousands of troops and air support and international headlines, but the small, precise actions in the shadows. One skilled operator in exactly the right place at exactly the right time, making the shots that changed everything. The book said one person couldn't make a difference against impossible odds. Lila Cole had spent her career proving the book wrong, one impossible shot at a time, and she wasn't finished yet. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to hear more powerful stories of brave women in uniform.